Thanks for joining us for today's webinar. Today we're looking at managing cognitive change in the workplace, and your presenters are Marley and Elizabeth, and they'll be online very shortly. In the spirit of reconciliation, MS Limited acknowledges the traditional custodians of country throughout Australia and their connections to land, sea and community. We pay our respects to their elders past, present and emerging, and we extend that respect and that welcome to all Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples with us today. Our two presenters today are Elizabeth Stenhouse and Marley Levath, and both Liz and Marley have trained as occupational therapists and work in our employment support service. And they've been around MS for a while now, so they've got a lot of good skills and a lot of experience in helping people manage the changes that might ordinarily impact their work. So today we're looking at managing cognitive change in the workplace, and it's our pleasure to have them with us today. So if you guys want to pop your cameras on and say hi, there's Liz. And Marley's here as well. Thanks, Marley. Thanks, Liz. I think Liz is starting us off.
I am. Thanks, Andrea, and hi, everyone. So we might get straight into it. If I'm going to the first slide. Thanks, Andrea. So today we're going to go through a bit of the background first, and then further on in the webinar we'll be getting into some more practical strategy side of things. So just a bit of an overview first. The term cognition refers to a group of mental processes such as visual, perception, spatial skills, language, calculation skills, information processing, attention, memory, and something called executive functions. So the visual, perceptual, and spatial skills, they're skills that allow us to do things such as recognize objects, to draw, assemble things, and find our way around in the world. Language refers to our ability to understand and use language in daily interactions. Performing simple and complex math are what is involved with the calculation side of things. Information processing skills are about our ability to focus, maintain, and shift our attention from one thing to another without losing track of what we're doing. And it's also about managing incoming information quickly. In terms of memory, it's actually quite a complex set of skills. It involves the learning, the storage of information, and the ability to retrieve that information on demand. And that last one there is the executive function abilities, and they enable us to get through our day by overseeing and coordinating tasks. It's also things like organizing, planning, sequencing of tasks, problem solving, decision making, our reasoning and judgment, and monitoring our behaviour. So the executive functions are quite a lot in there, and we will talk a little bit more about them further on. Now, the thing to talk about here is that the most commonly affected cognitive processes in MS are the last four there, so the attention, the information processing, the memory, and the executive functions. So cognitive changes in MS, probably about half of all people with MS will experience some form of cognitive change, so it is very common. For most people, the symptoms are very mild and they fluctuate from day to day. And cognitive changes are really very variable. So it's very different between each person with MS, exactly how a cognitive issue will impact them. So what's causing these changes? Some of the cognitive changes can be a direct result of what's happening in the brain, but also there can be a lot of other factors. So fatigue is a big one. which may be caused by MS, or it might also be poor sleep, stress, any sort of mood changes, as well as medications. So can we actually do something about it? Absolutely, yes, we can. And in this webinar, as I said earlier, we are going to focus on the strategies that we can look at to implement and overcome some challenges, especially in the context of work. The challenges and strategies that we'll present are based on what our clients and we have learnt over the years, and we really hope that you get something out of it. So I think we're going to go to a little poll now just to get an idea of what who's in the group today.
Yeah, absolutely. So this poll is asking what type of job do you have? So you should see up on your screen at the moment the options of white collar professional managerial admin, or blue collar manual work, grey collar skilled workers that complete some manual labour, such as technicians or nurses, or maybe you'd come in the category of pink collar, which is retail, sales and customer service. So using your mouse, you can hover over the answer that best applies to you, and clicking your mouse in the little box beside that option. Now, you feel free to put in other comments and suggestions in the question area, and that's okay. If you're not working right now, that is okay. You can answer when you are normally working. You can put in your answer, and that will just contribute to the discussion. So one more person maybe to vote on that, or maybe if you're on the phone, you can't vote on that. That's everyone. That's wonderful. I'll share the results with you. So the people online today, 75% of people are in the category of white collar, professional managerial admin. 13% are in the grey collar, skilled workers that complete some manual labour, and 13% in the pink collar, retail sales and customer service. So thanks for joining in that. That's terrific.
Thanks, everyone. All right, we will keep moving along. It just gives us a bit of an idea when we're talking about some of the strategies later, so thank you. So when we're talking about cognitive weaknesses, in 2015, this survey was done of 6,000 people with MS in America. They were asked about their cognitive issues, and this is the results of their survey. So as you can see there, most people found that memory, information processing, and word finding were the most reported functions that were impaired. And maybe that's something that you feel similar. So what we might do now is highlight that although there are some cognitive functions that are commonly affected in MS, there's also some that are generally not, and these can be seen as cognitive strengths. So this is simple attention, so our ability to pay attention for one task if the information is presented in a suitable pace. Usually people with MS would be able to remember the information. So the other is procedural memory, so knowing how to do things and tasks we have already completed before and mastered. So it might be something like driving a car, cooking, those sorts of habitual things that you've already learned over many years. Can also be in the work as well. So it might be that you've done the same task in this job for many, many years and you have no problem doing it because you've mastered it. Language is the other strength, so the ability to understand and express yourself. And then the other thing to note is general knowledge. So all the information that we've collected throughout the years, they're all cognitive strengths. And I think we're going to throw over to Marley now.
Yes, thank you, Liz.
Thanks, Marley.
So let's start basically reviewing the most commonly affected areas in MS. So let's start with attention and concentration, which are regarded as the building blocks for higher cognitive abilities. And attention really refers to our ability to select and focus on the relevant stimuli while basically we ignore competing stimuli. So think about, for example, if you work in an open plan office, that you need really to, if the phone call's coming in, you actually need to ignore and just select and focus on the task that you're doing at hand. Attention is also about your ability to switch between stimuli. So for example, if you're being interrupted, are you able to move back to the task that you've done already? And this basically leads to the potential challenges at work that many of my clients and Lisa's clients experience. So for example, difficulty to concentrate. So when we look at attention for a long period of time, that's called concentration. So if you need to concentrate for something for a long period of time, you might find it difficult. For example, if you need to read a long document, or if there's a long meeting and you find that your mind starts to wander. You might have difficulty doing two simultaneous tasks. For example, there's a meeting and you need to take notes, but it's very difficult for you to listen while you're actually taking minutes. Being interrupted, so as I said before, let's say that you get a phone call while you were doing something and then you need to go back to the task that you've done. Oh, where was I? What have I done? I'm not sure, you know, lost a bit of track. And as I said before, yeah, open plan offices, getting easily distracted might be a bit of a challenge. So what kind of strategies might be helpful? So let's start with focusing first on how do you manage mental energy / fatigue? Because the first few strategies really, it's about knowing which tasks at work require more attention and or concentration, and being mindful of how much energy they require. So for example, for tasks that require more attention to detail, more concentration, we would recommend actually to do them when you're feeling more fresh, when you're feeling less fatigued. So if you know that, for example, mornings are the best times for you, maybe this is the best time to start with a task that require more attention. At the same time, being mindful of, okay, I'm feeling a bit fatigued, then you can alternate between tasks which require more or less concentration. So for example, if you still have some tasks that needs to be done but require less mental energy, this is the time to do them. And it's really important, and Liz would cover that a bit later, to take short and regular rest breaks. We would usually recommend every 30 to 45 minutes. An hour is the total maximum. And of course, it really depends whether it's possible or not, to keep recharging your battery. And so really this is about managing your mental energy, because it requires attention, concentration really depend on your energy levels. If you have a really long task, maybe you can break it down to smaller components and tick it off, you know, because if it's difficult for you to concentrate for a long period of time, so take a big task and break it down. Prioritizing tasks is really important, and completing one task at a time. Most of us, regardless of MS, are monotaskers. So really, multitasking is not good for most people. So if you do one thing at a time while you're prioritizing your task, you would achieve much, much more, and you'll be much more productive than doing a few tasks simultaneously. And also it would take less mental energy. It's also important to set times for each task. So make sure that you've, if you decided to dedicate 20 minutes for a task, so try to finish it within the time that you've set so you can continue moving on to your next tasks. If you're finding yourself that you're getting easily distracted, using noise cancelling headphones have been very helpful for many of our clients. Or perhaps you can book a private room, block a time in your diary, and just, you know, it almost sends a message that now you can't be interrupted. I would also like to mention two assistive technology items, which are the LiveScribe Smart Pen and the Otter app. So for people who really like taking notes, like using a pen, the LiveScribe Smart Pen might be best for them. It's basically like a pen, but you can also record the audio. The notes and the audio are basically connected. And then when you tap on the notes, you can actually listen to the recording. So it's really cool. And it can be synced. You can actually use your computer for that or an iPad. So there are different types of smart pens. I've put a little link there so you can take a look about the different products. However, people who actually prefer just to record either meetings or remote meetings, but also it could be in person, can use the Otter app. The basic features are free. It basically records, transcribe, and you can even, again, tap on the notes, you can listen to it, you can share it with other people. It's a very cool app. And again, you've got the link so you can follow it up after our webinar today.
Marley?
Yes.
Nissa asked a question about the regular short rest break. What would one of those look like? Okay,
so rest break again, and Liz I think would cover it a bit later, but in general, I would say, so if you're, for example, working in a desk-based job, away from the desk, stretching yourself, getting a glass of water, going to the toilet, away from the screen, away from the desk. Even, it depends on how much time you've got, but we have some clients, during the lunch break, listening to some mindfulness, meditation, relaxation, even have a bit of a nap. It really depends. Going for a walk, it really depends how much time do you have. But usually breaks, it's mean like away from the desk, away from the screen, getting up, moving around. Depends, of course, again, on the type of the job that you're doing.
Thank you.
Pleasure. Moving on to our next cognitive domain, which is information processing speed. So, and this is sometimes what I think that many of our clients find very frustrating. They basically tell us, it takes me much longer to do things that in the past I used to do so quickly. So it is very common, and it's really about the time that it takes to complete a mental task. And it's specifically true for new mental tasks, new information, things that are novel to us. However, it could also be with difficulty with keeping up with conversations, especially with people who talk very quick in meetings or even being given instructions. And then as a result, you might be feeling overloaded. So here the key word is quickly. So you might be struggling to complete complex tasks or learn new tasks quickly. You might be struggling to solve problems or make decisions quickly. You can still do all of that, but it takes you longer. So the strategies, really, the first and foremost is be patient with yourself. Don't stress yourself out. Don't be angry at yourself. I know it's easy to say, but you're not going to really serve yourself if you're going to be angry or frustrated with yourself. So being mindful of that you need actually, perhaps you do need extra time. And also, if you have disclosed, for example, you can ask your colleagues or supervisor to slow down if they talk very quickly. You can also repeat back the information to make sure that you've captured everything correctly, or you can ask them to repeat. But if you say it in your own words, that's actually a processing strategy. So this is during conversations. If it's that there's a meeting coming up, be prepared for the meeting. So be familiar with the agenda. You can write down dot points, keywords that would help you. As much as possible, give yourself more time to complete new or complex tasks and keep practicing them until you master them. And it's also about prioritizing your tasks and postponing or delegating non-urgent tasks. So rather than bombarding yourself with lots of things to do, if you need extra time to do extra tasks, prioritize that until you master them, and then you can move on. And of course, as I mentioned, if you disclose your diagnosis of MS, talk to your supervisor about providing you with extra time, or maybe perhaps reducing a bit the workload so you do have more time to complete the tasks. And it's really about here the quality and not just the quantity. If we can move on to the next one, verbal fluency and word finding. Again, many people with MS finding this very frustrating, you know, trying to say something, tip of the tongue, but you really can't retrieve the information. You can't really find the right words. So that can be really frustrating. And I can say also that verbal fluency relies on information processing speed. So you might not be able to find the right word immediately or quickly, but if you give yourself time, it will come up, and usually it does. I have lots of conversation with clients that really can't find the right word, and then after a few minutes, oh, here it is. So the potential challenges at work could be that you won't be as confident in participating, for example, in meetings, or if you need to present, even job interviews. And so this is in relation to when you need like verbal expression of yourself, but in writing, you might be struggling to write emails or reports because again, you can't find the right words quickly enough. So what could be the strategies? Again, be patient with yourself. Being anxious, being harsh on yourself and hard on yourself, that's not going to be helpful. So really it's about trying to relax. And I think people usually do that. They use a different word. If it's for meetings, again, try to prepare as much as you can for meetings or for presentations. Write down keywords and practice before the event. It could be actually in relation to job interviews as well. And if you do need to write reports or emails, and again, the words don't come quickly enough, you can actually use templates, thesaurus. I've had some clients that have been using templates and preparing most common list of words. So really, rather than keep inventing the wheel, they can actually copy, paste, adjust. So they have something to start with. Again, it takes a bit the mental energy to think from the beginning. So they just need, again, to use what's there already and adjust it. So I can think of, for example, teachers that need to write student reports and they have some templates and even maybe sentences or common list of words that's been really, really helpful, and they've been more productive as a result. I hope it all makes sense. We will move on to the big one, which is memory and new learning. As Liz mentioned, it's a very complex skill set that requires learning of information, storage of the information, and then retrieval. Now, many of our clients say, oh, I have some memory issues. And if you remember, that was actually the most perceived challenging cognitive domain that people with MS have actually identified. But memory relies very heavily on attention and processing speed of information. So many times I find that, well, if during conversation with clients or sometimes after I do some cognitive assessment, it's their attention or processing information that's affected, which then impacts on memory. And I hope it makes sense, because let's say that your mind was wandering, so you really haven't captured the information from the first place, or so you won't be able to remember it. That makes sense. Or let's say that someone talks very, very quickly, so you missed some of the information that was presented verbally to you. Hence, you won't be able to remember it. So this is why I'm saying some people say that they have memory issues, but it could be because of their reduced attention or reduced processing, or actually maybe a combination. And obviously the recall or retrieval of information, this is another aspect that you need to, and again, that relies also on processing speed. So you may be able to recall some information, but it might take you longer. And the way that I do it, sometimes if I give, if someone gives you a hint, oh yes, now I remember what it is. So this is again showing that you were able still to recall the information, it just took you longer and you needed a bit of a hint. So potential challenges at work could be quite varied. So for example, I have some clients that have been struggling to remember names of colleagues, or recalling information that they have read, that they've been shown to them or said to them. So again, in conversations. It could be difficult remembering tasks that you've done already, because let's say that you've been bombarded with lots of things. Or maybe you struggle to remember tasks which you need to complete in the future. So this is what's called prospective memory. Okay, and especially could be quite challenging for people who have lots of tasks to complete, competing tasks, high-paced environments or high-paced roles. So that could be quite challenging. So strategies, and again, these are very general strategies, and usually what we do in our consultations, for example, with our clients, is really individualize each strategy for each person, for their jobs. So, and of course, one size doesn't fit all. So these are very general and generic. So remember, I said that memory issues could be due to attention issues. So it's really about being mindful and paying attention. So if you find, for example, that your mind wanders, try to catch yourself and bring yourself to the here and now, to the present moment. Mindfulness can be very helpful. So really being mindful of if you tend to lose attention. Again, in relation to processing, so what we've discussed before, give yourself more time to process and recall information. So it might not come as quickly, but it will come. So be patient with yourself and practice new tasks frequently so you master them. So it's not new anymore. Again, it might take you longer, but you will be able to master it eventually. Now, some of the things that I tend to do with my clients who struggle to learn new information is having a discussion with them about what your learning style is and encourage them to be an active learner. What do I mean by that? So many people are visual learners. These are the people that finding writing notes, highlighting keywords, using guidelines, manuals. These are the people that really rely on visual information to learn best. Many people are like that. However, some people might be auditory learners. So really they process information best by listening to it. So for example, repeating information that was said and verifying it, or recording notes using the assistive technology I mentioned before. So actually listening to it would actually help them to process and learn it best. But there are some people who are actually kinesthetic learners. And what do I mean by that? These are the people who actually learn best by showing them how to do the task, doing the task themselves, and then asking for feedback. Actually, just this morning, I had this discussion with one of my clients' employers. So she now needs to learn a new software for work. She's been giving a manual, but she's really struggling. She's trying to follow the instructions, but she can't do it. So we've had this discussion that really the best way for her to learn is basically being shown how to do it herself, and then getting the feedback so she can learn best. And it also depends on the task. So for example, for learning a new program software, maybe this would be the best because you actually do it. You don't just read the manuals because it won't say maybe anything, or auditory. So it really depends on the task as well. And some people learn best by actually combining the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Watching videos or webinars, for example, you get the visual, you get the auditory, maybe not so much the kinesthetic if you're not actually doing something active, but it's a combination, and that can actually help you to process the information better. People who really struggle remembering names, I usually talk to them about using association with visualization, and it works best for visual learners. What do I mean by that? For example, if your colleague's name is Misty, let's say, you can try to visualize a misty mountain and associate the name with something visual, and then picture Misty like her face on top of the mountain, for example. So it's very creative, it's visual, and the association needs to be very individual. So it needs to be meaningful to you, okay? Someone might come up with something totally different, but that's fine. I mentioned before that some of the challenges could be like, can't remember, or struggling to remember whether I've done some task or some task that I need to do. So here, organization strategies could be very, very helpful. Some people prefer the more manual strategies, like using a diary, calendar, organizer, notepad. Some people prefer the digital options. There's even apps like the Todoist, but this is only one option, or even a digital diary or calendar. But its organization strategies could be really, really helpful, so you can actually track all the tasks that you've already done and track what you still need to be doing. But of course, you know, use the organization strategy that works best for you. And for people who actually work in offices, like I know that 75% now are doing a more professional admin managerial jobs. So many of our clients find that actually using 2 screens in the office have been very helpful, because then they have all the information in front of them. They don't need to remember things, so it's a really good compensatory strategy, especially if you need to look at lots of information. You have all this information in front of you, so again, it compensates for memory issues. So this is a big slide about the memory in new learning. Any questions? No? Good?
No, not at the moment.
So we'll move on to the executive functions, which is basically I would say, the CEO of the brain. These are the higher cognitive abilities, the mental skills that help the brain to organize and act on information, as Liz mentioned before, and it covers all these different skills, which include planning, prioritizing, organization skills, even initiating, knowing where to start the task, flexible thinking. So let's say plan A didn't work. Do you know what? No, have you thought of plan B? And if something doesn't work, can I flexibly move on to a different solution? Problem solving, decision making as well, self-monitoring, so really being able to monitor our own performance, and also managing our emotions and control our behaviors, even when we're feeling angry, frustrated, or struggling, for example. So the next slides. So it's a combination that's basically based, I mean, one of my clients actually reviewed this the slides and gave us this feedback, because executive functions include so many skills. So you'll be able to see potential challenges at work and potential strategies for each challenge. So for example, let's say that you're really not sure where to start, so you tend to procrastinate. So what we would suggest is really understand what is expected of you and start the task only then, okay? So if you're not sure, ask your manager, your boss, make sure that you understand what is expected of you. That would help you perhaps to start the task. Some people might tend to dive into tasks without prioritizing or planning. So it's really important that you give yourself time to plan, prioritize, and organize something. Some people might say, oh, it's a waste of time. Actually not, because then you can see what needs to be done, when it needs to be done, how much time do you actually have. So it's really, really important that you do that. And again, if you're not sure, ask for help. So again, making checklists, to-do lists, and tick off tasks while you've completed them. And set time limits for each task. So if one task needs to take half an hour, finish after half an hour. If you need a bit of extra time, just be mindful, because there are other tasks that you need to complete as well. So being aware of your time management skills. And for that, again, using planners, calendars, all the organization strategies we mentioned before. Some people might say or do the first thing that comes to mind. Again, remembering about emotional and behavioral control. So again, give yourself time to weigh up different options. So don't try to be mindful of that, and give yourself time to look for different options. Next, people who tend to rush into tasks and making mistakes, especially if you have a very high caseload or workload. So it's really important that you check. So this is the self-monitoring. Check your work before you submit it. Again, I'm not saying you should do it before you submit it. Just check it. Doesn't mean that it doesn't have to be perfect, because no one is perfect. But at the same time, especially if you have a high caseload, high workload, just make sure that you do it correctly. And this is why I think also doing one task at a time is very important. If you struggle with quick decision making or dealing with changes at work, again, quick. So again, it's really important that you do give yourself a bit of time to make the decisions, asking for help if you need, taking the rest breaks, especially if, it takes a lot of mental energy and effort. So it's important that you look after yourself when you do that. And if you tend to misplace items, whether it's at work or outside work, maybe at home, try to have a home for each item, and then they won't get lost because you know exactly where they are. So if you've taken something, you put it back at the same place, that's it. It's not going to get lost. And Liz is going to talk very soon about environment. Thank you.
So lots of information there. Did we have any other questions at that point before I go?
There is a question, and let me know if this will be covered later. But Johnny's wondering if you've got any examples of having these conversations with your workplace around making, allowing people to be more productive by making some changes.
Marley, you still? I think it sort of comes down to one of those things that is individualized to the scenario. And in the employment support service, we certainly assist people with those conversations. I think before you have any conversation with your employer, you have to be really confident that they are supportive of you. Talking about cognition is a tricky topic with employers if they don't have a good understanding of MMS, because unfortunately it can be misinterpreted as perhaps not being able to do the job. So an example of having a conversation without needing to give away too much would be to say to your employer, oh, you've just come up to me with a lot of information. You're telling me I'm just in the middle of another task. Could we have a meeting at 2 o'clock about this topic? Or I've noticed that you tend to come up to my desk. Perhaps this is a conversation in a supervision session or something like that. You do tend to come to my desk quite often throughout the day. I understand there's things that you need to tell me. Is there any chance that you could provide it to me in an email or an instant message? And if it's super urgent, put that in the email so that you're managing the interruptions. That would be one example that I know worked for some of my clients. Have you got any others, Marley?
Not at the top of my head, but I'll have a think.
Yeah.
Yep, it is about having those conversations about, or without, as you say, without revealing everything, making it a conversation about, I find this works best for me.
Yeah.
Jessica had put in, Jessica had put another example in about turning off notifications, but then the flip side of that was that her manager picked her up on that because she missed something. So it's sort of having that discussion about, I find when I'm working on a project, I'm going to block out this time in my calendar and I'll catch up on the other things later. It's
about being able
communicate it.
Communication of what works for you and why you're doing it to be productive. So making it clear that it's going to actually help them enable you to do your job. Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're going to talk about some of that other strategies outside of, I guess, really sort of specific stuff. So this is more about the other things that happen that impact our cognition. So fatigue is a big one. And this is fatigue management when we're thinking about a task. So what are the task-based things that we can do when it comes to fatigue? So what Marley's mentioned earlier, scheduling your harder or more detailed attention tasks for when you feel most fresh. So for some people that might be the morning, but for others it might be the afternoon. It might be after you've had lunch and you've had a bit of a break, and that might be your, you know, best time. And sometimes it might change. So sometimes you might find that Monday mornings are good for you, but other weeks Monday mornings are not good for you. So you've got to kind of be a little bit flexible about when you're feeling your best and rescheduling those like heavy attention tasks to that time. Breaking down the task into smaller components and pacing yourself. So if you've got a really big project that you need done that involves, you know, maybe consulting with a whole lot of other people, and you've got a deadline of 2 weeks, actually putting into your calendar key parts across the fortnight of time where you've broken it up and you've actually paced it out. So you've thought about what's attention, going to use a lot of attention. You've thought about what's going to need a lot of talking to people, and you've actually paced it out. You've put breaks in between. The other thing that you can be doing is using tools and equipment. So, you know, is there something that you could use to make that task easier to perform? So if it is that you have to deliver piles of files from one side of the office to the other, rather than doing 6 trips, could you be using a trolley? Okay, we might move on to the next one. So the next one is around environmental things that we can do to help with fatigue. So have a think about how you can change or adapt your work environment to make it less fatiguing for you. The things to consider are your body mechanics. So an ergonomically sound workstation will reduce energy that's lost due to poor posture or poor muscle efficiency, or perhaps sometimes pain as well. Limiting your exposure to hot and cold, so trying to not have those symptoms exacerbated by being too cold or too hot, and using air conditioning or perhaps personal cooling aids to help with that. Might be a small desk fan, it might be some heated, like a heated blanket. Consider energy conservation techniques. So for example, doing all your printing in one go, and collecting it all together at the end of the day. So queue up all your printing and then go collect it at the end of the day or at lunchtime. Choosing a desk position that limits how far you need to walk, or perhaps getting a car parking space that's closer to the door of your workplace, so that you don't need to walk as far in your day. It could also be about the position you are in proximity to the toilet as well. The other thing is about the visual and auditory aspects of our environment. So the noisier an environment is visually, so if you work in a really cluttered desk, or if you've got a lot of background noise, that is going to impact your fatigue levels, because you're having to work harder to filter out that information to be able to concentrate. So have a think about whether you can tidy things up. And one of the tools that might be helpful is some noise cancelling headphones. These things are about the person. So think about how you can change your personal practices for a normal daily activities to maximize your energy levels for a work day. So some people might, for instance, prepare all their meals for the week, or they might pre-purchase some frozen, microwave meals, or pre-make microwavable meals, so that you don't have to spend that energy in the evening cooking, thinking, shopping, cooking, and preparing a meal. It could also be things like sitting down to have a shower, sitting down to get dressed, finding ways in your day that you can change how you operate that will help you conserve energy for the important stuff, the thinking in your workday, but also, the stuff outside of work as well, being able to sit down and have a conversation with your family and talk about that news item that was just on the television. So the pacing yourself is the key thing. The short and regular breaks really helps with the pacing. And I know that's really hard for some people. They like to make hay while the sun shines. But if you actually break before you reach the extremity of fatigue, you're going to stretch out your energy levels and have more capacity in your day, be more productive, and achieve more. Delegating tasks where possible is also another thing. So you don't have to do everything. Look to other places where you can get help. And there is so many aspects to managing your own fatigue that one slide is not enough. So I would encourage you to consider watching some of the other webinars that MS have, and we've got some good ones just on fatigue management. So that's just a little taste of what you can do. So stress and mood. So as Marley kind of mentioned quite a few times, if you've got any sort of anxiety or stress or low mood, the thinking aspects and the cognition is going to be harder. So trying to stay well in our mental well-being is actually a really important, like if that's all you do after this, that will be a really good start. Because if you can keep on top of that emotional side of it, everything else becomes easier. Even the energy and the fatigue levels is easier. So relaxation, meditation, yoga, exercise, doing things that are fun, that bring you joy, and seeing a psychologist or a counsellor if you need to. And again, this is a very much something that you could be looking into further in our education slides. We have a series on meditation, so as well. But I would say if you just want it as a starting point and you've never meditated before, there are some really good apps out there as well. Headspace and Smiling Mind are both good ones. Let me throw back to Marley.
Thank you, Liz. And we will just finish with mentioning cognitive reserve and neuroplasticity. So really, cognitive reserve, it's about the brain resilience to brain damage. And neuroplasticity really refers to the brain's ability to change based on different experiences that we actually experience. So it's really about finding the right and fun challenge for you to do. So people are, I've had some clients that ask me, so what can I do to improve my cognitive abilities? We spoke in very in length about the different cognitive domains and strategies, but in general, yes, there are things that you can do to help yourself to actually maximize the cognitive reserve and really increase your brain's neuroplasticity. But it really depends. So, for example, for many of my clients who really do need to learn all the time new things at work, and they read a lot of information, and their job is very cognitively demanding, basically I would tell them maybe just fun. Maybe it's okay to just have time for relaxation and doing something fun that you just enjoy for the sake of it, without needing to learn something new. But it really depends. But if you do have a monotonous work and you feel like you don't really use much of your brain, for example, at work, then yes, learning something new would always be good for your brain, but at the same time, it needs to be fun for you. So, for example, I've had some clients that in the 40s and 50s that learned how to, play the guitar or learn a new language. So taking a course, or it could be using an app, reading, playing games. It could be, for example, for verbal fluency, crossword, trivia. Exercising is a wonderful way to actually train the brain, especially if you need to learn some new exercises that require coordination. That's wonderful. There are some online brain training games. I mentioned a few here. Again, I don't want to recommend any of them, but at the same time, they have some scientifically proven results. But from what I've been reading and researching, they usually require people to play quite frequently, like I'm talking about at least 5 times a week, 30 minutes a day. For people who are working, have young families, or, it's not realistic. And also there's always the question, would it transfer to real life? So sure, I might be actually getting better at the games, but will it actually transfer to real life? This question hasn't been answered yet. So it's really about finding what's right and fun for you. And just again, think about something that you enjoy doing, that you keep you motivated. But in general, learning something new is always great. That's it. Thank you.
That's been great. Thank you so much. There's time now for some questions, and I'll give a little bit of fill time while people want to type in their questions into that question area. And just to remind people that there are a whole lot of supports and services that MS can help you with. So the Employment Support Service is one of those, but as to is peer support, connecting with other people who are also living with MS to share how they've found it, ideas, tips and tricks, that kind of thing. Even perhaps having a talk to one of the nurse advisors or the social work advisors through MS Connect. There's a whole range of support that we can offer. And it was interesting that, Liz, you mentioned that we touched just the tip of the iceberg around fatigue management. We've got podcasts, we've got webinar libraries, there's lots of information on our website. So look for more information if anything has sparked that today. And that's absolutely what we're here for. So let's just have a look. Larry picked up the point that had been on one of the slides about keeping hydrated. So that idea of when we're dehydrated, we tend to feel more fatigued. So making sure we drink plenty of water. There's some thank yous. Johnny's wondering how we continue this conversation for our own circumstances. Well, look, there's something to be said there for I'm going to say even the potential for a neuropsychology assessment. I think that I'd be getting nods from Liz, if I could see them, Liz and Marley, but I've lost them. Here they are. If you're concerned about your any cognitive change, having a neuropsych assessment can be a great way of determining any changes, but also checking your strength areas, because as commented before, it's important to maximize your strengths. So not look just for where there might be gaps, but to look for the areas that you're actually functioning really well and build on those strengths. So if you needed that type of support, that you can talk to your neurologist about a neuropsych assessment. But if it's a conversation about maintaining your employment, that's certainly a conversation for the Employment Support Service. And Johnny, I'm pretty sure you've told me earlier that you're currently looking for work. We have a small service around job seeking, but equally it might be a conversation with the social work advisors or the nurse advisors around what do you do next and how do you progress this. That's terrific. So some thank yous from people who have had to leave. So I think we covered most of the questions along the way. As with most of our programs, if you get offline and you suddenly think, oh, I should have asked, just send an email and we'll pass it on to the right people to get your questions answered. That's terrific. All right, Nissa has popped in a comment around, yeah, all right, this is a good one, Nissa. Great observation. If you find you're having a hard time with cognition, and that is particularly emotional, how do you get that feeling of clarity again? And there's no easy answer to that, but I guess I would encourage you to seek support. That support might come from anywhere from chatting to a peer right through to connecting with a psychologist who can talk you through, work with you through some of those emotions. So it again, that's different for everybody, but seek support, and MS Connect might be your first port of call, where you put in a call there and the team there help you work out what would be most appropriate for your situation. So yes, don't do it alone. That's what we're here for. So thank you everyone for participating. Thank you for throwing in your comments and your questions along the way. Thanks for participating in the poll. And thanks so much, Liz and Marley, for sharing your expertise today. Fabulous to have the material presented in. Not only here are some of the challenges that people might be experiencing, but here are some strategies to help with that. That's really helpful and really practical. So thank you both very much. And thanks everyone for being online. This program will be available to review again, so you can go back and revisit some of the things that you might have heard and process it again for your situation. So we'll say goodbye for now, and we'll look forward to seeing you at future programs. Thanks everyone.